Imagine for a moment that everything you've learned about the story of Judas is wrong. What if I told you that Judas, the man considered the greatest traitor of all time, could actually have been a hero? What if his betrayal wasn't an act of villainy, but one of divine obedience? Welcome to Unholy Secrets, the channel that unveils the darkest secrets of religious history. Today we're going to discuss one of the most controversial and debated texts in Christian history, the Gospel of Judas. A gospel that, unlike the traditional narrative, portrays Judas not as the villain, but as the most enlightened disciple, the one who, by betraying Jesus, played an essential role in the divine plan. The story of Judas Iscariot, the apostle who betrayed Jesus, is one of the most well-known in Christianity. But the version we know, passed down through the centuries, might be wrong. The Gospel of Judas, a recently discovered text, presents a completely new and surprising view of this character. In this gospel, Judas isn't the traitor, but the divinely chosen collaborator to fulfill Jesus' destiny. In today's video, we'll explore the controversies surrounding this story and try to understand what lies behind this alternative version. What has been hidden from us about Judas? Was he truly a traitor or a hero? Before we continue, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. This way you won't miss any intriguing content like this. Now, let's dive into what's been concealed from us for centuries. The Gospel of Judas is not a new text. In fact, it remained hidden for many centuries, and its discovery only occurred in 1978 when a manuscript was found in a cave in Egypt, specifically in the Nag Hammadi region, famous for its archaeological discoveries related to early Christianity. The text was in poor condition due to the time of neglect and the fragile nature of the papyrus, but after careful restoration and the help of experts, it was finally translated and its content was revealed to the public. When the gospel reached academia and the general public, it caused great shock as it presented a radically different view of Judas, challenging centuries of Christian tradition. This gospel belongs to the group of so-called apocryphal gospels, meaning those texts not included in the New Testament, but still offering a unique perspective on Christian history. Unlike the canonical Gospels, the apocryphal ones often provide alternative accounts of key figures and events in early Christianity. The Gospel of Judas is a work that belongs to what we now call Gnosticism, a religious movement that emerged in the early centuries of Christianity, particularly within Christian communities in Egypt. The Gnostics believed that the material world was inferior and corrupted, with true knowledge, or gnosis, being the key to spiritual salvation. This idea of secret and profound knowledge about the spiritual world and the divine plan is crucial for understanding the unique perspective of the Gospel of Judas. The text presents Judas not as the betrayer, but as the disciple who received the deepest knowledge about Jesus' mission, being the only one to understand the true purpose of the Messiah's coming to earth. For this reason, Judas is portrayed as someone chosen to fulfill a crucial role, carrying out the most difficult and painful act, handing over his master for crucifixion, fully aware of the spiritual impact of this action for humanity. In the Gospel of Judas, the figure of Judas is completely different from the one presented in the canonical Gospels. In the traditional texts, Judas is the apostle who betrays Jesus for 30 silver coins, handing him over to the Romans, which leads to the crucifixion. This act has been considered for centuries the greatest example of betrayal and disloyalty among the disciples. However, in the Gospel of Judas, he is described in a radically distinct way. The most enlightened disciple, the only one who possesses a deep understanding of Jesus' mission, and the one who ultimately acts as a necessary instrument for the fulfillment of the divine plan. According to the text, Jesus reveals to Judas the deepest secrets of the spiritual realm, a knowledge reserved for a few. In this revelation, he explains that the betrayal is not an act of disloyalty or selfishness, but a divine necessity, an action that is predestined to ensure the fulfillment of humanity's salvation. Judas, then, did not act out of personal interest, as many believe, but was specifically chosen to fulfill a sacred mission. He understood with clarity and depth that Jesus' death on the cross was the only way to free humanity from sin and spiritual ignorance. For this sacrifice to be fulfilled, Judas had to hand him over to his enemies, becoming the vehicle through which Jesus' destiny would be realized. In the Gospel of Judas, he is not the villain, but rather the tragic hero, the one who, through his action, enables the fulfillment of the divine plan. He is the only one who has the courage, spiritual vision, and understanding necessary to fulfill what was required of him. This vision of the character reveals an unexpected complexity and challenges the traditional interpretation. The Gospel thus presents us with a figure of Judas that is much more complex and profound than the one we were taught over the centuries. He stops being merely the traitor to become a key character in the salvation narrative, possessing a secret wisdom that transcends simplistic conceptions of good and evil. One of the main issues addressed in the Gospel of Judas is the nature of Judas's betrayal. According to the traditional view, Judas is the traitor who handed Jesus over to the Romans, leading to his death on the cross, an act interpreted as the manifestation of the greatest mistake and disloyalty possible. However, the Gospel of Judas presents a completely different view, one that questions the historical perspective on Judas. According to this text, Judas did not betray Jesus, but did exactly what Jesus asked him to do, precisely fulfilling a crucial role in the Christian narrative. The Gospel of Judas suggests that, for salvation to be possible, Jesus' death on the cross was an inevitable necessity and central to the fulfillment of the divine plan of redemption. And for this to happen, it was imperative that Judas handed Jesus over to the Romans, thus carrying out an essential action for the salvation process. It was not betrayal, but a divine collaboration orchestrated from the beginning. Jesus, aware of the fate that awaited him, knew that his death was essential for the redemption of humanity, which is why he chose Judas to carry out this task, entrusting him with a role of great importance. Throughout his journey, Jesus had known that his death was inevitable, but he also knew that the betrayal of one of his disciples would be the key to initiating the process that would lead to the crucifixion and salvation. The Gospel of Judas, therefore, challenges the traditional view that Judas was a ruthless villain. On the contrary, it reveals that Judas's action was essential, almost like a personal sacrifice, for Jesus' mission to be fully completed. Judas was not an enemy, but the chosen collaborator for the realization of the greatest sacrifice in history, a role that, as difficult as it was vital for the fulfillment of the divine plan. To fully understand the Gospel of Judas, it is necessary to comprehend the Gnostic cosmology in which it is embedded. Gnosticism, a religious movement that emerged in the early centuries of Christianity, teaches that the material world is an inferior creation, a prison for the soul, and that true salvation can only be achieved by transcending this physical world and reaching the spiritual realm where true knowledge, or gnosis, resides. The central idea of Gnosticism is that the human being must free themselves from the limitations of the physical body and the chains of matter in order to attain enlightenment and union with the divine. The Gospel of Judas adopts this Gnostic view by describing Jesus as a divine entity who, although physically present on earth, was not part of this material world. Jesus was not, for the Gnostics, simply an ordinary human being, but a transcendental figure who possessed a deep knowledge of the true nature of existence and spiritual reality. Therefore, the crucifixion of Jesus was not just a tragedy or an event of physical suffering, but a form of liberation from the physical body, which, for the Gnostics, was a prison for the soul. Judas, by handing Jesus over, was, paradoxically, helping him to free himself from this material prison, allowing him to return to the spiritual realm and complete his cosmic mission. This interpretation places Judas not as a vile traitor, but as the Savior who, by acting according to the divine plan, allowed Jesus to fulfill his mission of transcendence and liberation. For the Gnostics, the crucifixion of Jesus was a cosmic necessity, something that could not be avoided, because only through this event could the redemption of the soul be achieved. Judas, therefore, was the chosen instrument to ensure this happened, precisely fulfilling a sacred role, essential to the divine plan of salvation and enlightenment. Instead of being seen as the villain of the story, he is presented as a fundamental piece within the grand cosmic scheme of spiritual salvation. The Gospel of Judas not only highlights Judas as the most enlightened disciple of all, but it also emphasizes his vital role in the divine plan that culminates in the death of Jesus. The text suggests that the crucifixion is not simply a tragedy, but a cosmic necessity, an indispensable part of the great plan of redemption and salvation for humanity. In order for salvation to be realized, the death of Jesus on the cross was inevitable. However, this sacrifice, which would be the climax of Jesus' mission, could only be carried out through the betrayal of his master, something that Judas was the only one to fully understand. According to the Gospel of Judas, Judas does not act out of self-interest, as the traditional view suggests, but is the essential agent in fulfilling the Messiah's destiny. He is described not as a traitor, but as the chosen disciple to help Jesus fulfill his role as the Savior. Unlike the Christian tradition, where his action is seen as an act of betrayal driven by greed or malice, in the Gospel of Judas, he is portrayed as an active and conscious participant in the divine plan. He does not act out of a desire for revenge or for selfish purposes, but from a deep and enlightened understanding of Jesus' spiritual mission and the necessity of Christ's death for the salvation of the world. This new portrayal of Judas raises challenging questions. If Judas was indeed fulfilling a task given by Jesus, can his actions still be considered betrayal in the traditional sense, or is it, in fact, a form of radical obedience and loyalty to the divine plan? The Gospel of Judas provokes this reflection, inviting us to reconsider the nature of betrayal and the complexity of the choices made within a greater divine plan, where the understanding of spiritual mission transcends the appearances of good and evil. It is important to highlight that the Gospel of Judas was widely rejected by the Catholic Church, and its inclusion in the canon was never considered a viable option by church leaders. From the earliest centuries, the traditional version of the Christian story depicted Judas as the greatest traitor of humanity, and the Church has worked for centuries to maintain and reinforce this image. The idea that Judas could have been a hero, or at least a necessary collaborator for the divine plan, is viewed as heretical by most theologians and religious leaders. For the Church, Judas's betrayal was an act of pure selfishness, driven by greed and malice with no divine explanation to justify it. The Gospel of Judas, on the other hand, presents a completely different version of this traditional narrative. In it, Judas is not a traitor driven by personal interests, but an enlightened disciple who, unlike the other apostles, understands the true spiritual mission of Jesus. He is portrayed as someone fulfilling an essential role within a larger divine plan, cooperating to ensure that Jesus' crucifixion takes place, knowing that this would be fundamental for the salvation of humanity. This perspective undoubtedly represents a threat to the established Christian orthodoxy and questions the foundations of many popular beliefs about Judas's role. However, the fact that the Church rejected the Gospel of Judas does not diminish the historical and theological significance of this text. Even though it is considered apocryphal and heretical, the Gospel of Judas offers a new perspective on the relationship between Judas, Jesus, and the nature of the crucifixion. It makes us question the narratives we know, bringing forth a profound reflection on the nature of sacrifice and the meaning of betrayal. By exploring this work, we are challenged to see the story in a completely different light, expanding our understanding of the events that shaped Christianity. After examining the ideas presented in the Gospel of Judas, an important and, for many, unsettling question arises. Was Judas truly a traitor? The answer, according to the Gospel of Judas, is no. If we take the text as true, then Judas was actually the only disciple who truly understood the role of Jesus in history, and by delivering his master to the Romans, he helped fulfill the divine salvation plan that had been foretold. The betrayal, therefore, is seen not as a selfish act, but as a necessary step for the death of Jesus to take place, enabling the redemption of humanity. This radical view challenges the way we have always seen the story of Judas. For centuries, he has been largely remembered as the villain, the one who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. However, the Gospel of Judas offers a completely new perspective. Judas could be seen as the hero who, through his action, made the death of Jesus possible and, consequently, the salvation of all. By doing what seemed to be an act of betrayal, he was actually fulfilling a key role in the fulfillment of the messianic prophecy. This perspective does not diminish Judas's suffering, but offers a new view of his role within the divine plan. He was not a man corrupted by greed, but someone who, with courage, understanding, and deep obedience to Jesus' will, carried out a painful divine mission. Contrary to the traditional image of Judas as the greatest traitor in history, the Gospel of Judas offers us the possibility of seeing him as the indispensable collaborator, the only one who had the courage and understanding necessary to ensure the fulfillment of salvation through Christ's sacrifice. The Gospel of Judas is a work that forces us to re-examine one of the most well-known and debated stories in Christianity. It challenges the traditional view of Judas as the greatest traitor in history and presents us with a new perspective, that of a man chosen to fulfill an essential role in the divine plan. By challenging the traditional narrative, the Gospel of Judas leads us to a deep reflection on what we really know about the events surrounding the death of Jesus. Was Judas really a traitor, or was he the hero who helped fulfill the greatest sacrifice in history? What more might be hidden in the pages of the non-canonical Gospels? This work reminds us that history is often much more complex and full of nuances than we are told. If we are willing to question the truths we have always accepted, we may discover a new view of humanity, sacrifice, and redemption. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more videos like this, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to not miss any updates. And if you're interested in this topic, I'm sure you won't regret watching the video that is appearing on the screen now. Click to continue this journey of discovery and mystery. See you there.